Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Spark of Genius Flesh and Blood production. And this is a very special one. We have Levi here, uh, call him the Azalea Master. He's definitely put up the best Azalea results at tournaments that we've seen so far here. Levi has graciously agreed to help us here at Spark of Genius understand the ins and outs of Azalea for all you fine folks and the viewers. And there is a side point if you do want to listen to his experiences and have more of this beautiful Azalea. You can check out Roundtable of Rathe, whatever you call it at home. No judgment here. For the content, we have the logo. We'll also have a description and a link. And with that, I am also joined by Rob, my co-creator, co-commentator, co-caster, co-compatriot in the top here, who's going to be driving the screen, as you can see in the middle here. So this is the Fab Library. I kind of understand why I said Fabrary now, but anyways,
just
so
clicked.
we have the Fabrary.
All of a sudden,
it was a long week. I don't patronize me here. So we have the Fabrary in the middle. This is going to be accessible. I believe it's a public list at this point, so everything will be either on FabTCG or Fabrary. However, the details of this list are going to be what's discussed here. So I want to just start out here. Levi, appreciate you coming on here. Welcome to the show, I guess.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about a little bit about Azalea's strengths and weaknesses. Of course, I think people are less familiar with Azalea unless they've started way back and they were when Arcane came out, before they were looking for classes. They kind of gave up when Lexi came out because Lexi was just seen as the more competitive ranger, probably with New Horizon and such. But walk me through a couple of the strengths weaknesses side on the Azalea.
Yeah, so Azalea, I think her biggest strength is Death Dealer, and just being able to generate card advantage, followed up by her ability to present on hits. So she thrives into these aggressive decks that don't want to block. And when you put your opponent in a position to where they have to block, then you get to play more of a mid-range game plan, which is what she wants to do. So her turnover turn is actually very, very strong. Her issue, I guess, leading into her weaknesses, she, by not having a traditional weapon, is very susceptible to fatigue. And I guess the other main weakness that comes with that is her value per hand on the offense is kind of the opposite of what you see with Rune Blades and Fi, where they want to play a 5-card hand. They have kind of this exponential additional value for each extra card. Azalea is kind of the opposite. The more cards you have, the less damage per card you do most of the time. Your total damage still goes up, but your damage per card goes down. So you want to be blocking, and you want to be just using small hands for your individual turn. So when you come across a deck that doesn't want to block you at all, doesn't want to attack you, and you don't get to use those cards to defend, all of a sudden you have to try and piece together these turns with 5 cards when your 5 cards don't actually do as much as most other decks' 5 cards. Your strength is your 2-card hands do more than most other decks' 2-card hands.
Right. Now, is that mainly because of the Death Dealer ability, or is that just because of something inherent with her kind of class cards, or why do you think that is?
So the biggest thing is because you don't have access to go again consistently, you have to focus on a singular attack. So instead of having that kind of 0 for 4 rate on a lot of things that you'd want to do, when you're adding in extra cards into the turn, it's your 0 for 3 on buffs, or even 0 for or 1 card to give dominate is not actually extra damage. It's just an additional keyword. And then obviously at the start of the turn, using Death Dealer to load, oftentimes if you have a yellow and an arrow, you're spending 1 card to load and draw, and then use the remaining resource to fire, which ends up being a net of 1 card for 5 with an on hit.
Right.
Which very, very good rate. So that's kind of the idea behind her strengths and weaknesses there.
Right. Okay, that's pretty reasonable. I guess we'll kind of go straight into the equipment. So Rob, if you scroll down a bit here,
Yeah, sure.
You'll see the equipment. There isn't a ton here.
I see 4.
There's
There's a sideboard
sure
set of
that's
equipments as well down here.
Sideboard is in the middle.
So we can start with the ones up here, and we can
start
go
with
down.
the 4 major ones.
Yep. Death Dealer is an incredible weapon. I think it's up there with the top weapons in the game. A lot of times people, when they mention Ranger, they go, oh, all your arrows just cost 1 extra. It's just a detriment. Well, I think if Azalea was stronger, people would be complaining about Death Dealer going, it's not fair. Azalea gets to just pay 1 resource to draw a card while doing what she already wanted to do. And that, yeah, Death Dealer is incredible. And the other kind of benefit that Azalea has over Lexi, because obviously Lexi can play Death Dealer, is the Skullbone Crosswrap, which technically Lexi can play, but the Skullbone Crosswrap gives you access to the top of your deck as far as knowing what's there, and the Azalea hero ability kind of lets you put that into the arsenal. I don't remember who it was, but I think it was probably like 6-8 months ago, someone made the statement that Azalea uses the top of her deck kind of as an extension of the hand, whether you're drawing it with Death Dealer, whether you're using Azalea to load it, and that kind of level of flexibility is probably one of the strongest things in Azalea. People often say it's like Red in the Ledger is the reason why you play the deck. I think it's Crosswrap and the hero ability and the Death Dealer are almost stronger than Red in the Ledger. Like I would cut Red in the Ledger before I cut Death Dealer and Crosswrap.
It's fair. I mean, yeah, it is a legendary for a reason. I guess the synergy is quite nice, of course, to be able to extend your kind of hand into your deck at any given time.
Yeah, it's a cool concept for sure.
Yeah. So those are the two like main pieces. Obviously, Tunic fits in very well. You'll notice that this deck has a lot of reds, and on your standard turn of pitch to load with Death Dealer, fire a 1-cost arrow, cost 2. So whenever you draw a hand that doesn't have a yellow or a blue, that Tunic resource just saves you an entire extra card, which is, I mean, that's what you want. You want 1 extra card every 3-4 turns. So Tunic just fits the bill perfectly.
Awesome.
Bullseye Bracers.
Oh, sorry.
This one's actually has
Ignoring
been
the
debated. It's been debated in the Azalea community for quite some time. As we've seen Bolt and Shot grow in popularity, it didn't used to get played as much.
Yeah.
People would opt for Bracers of Belief, which kind of have that pseudo reveal a card or pseudo opt, but also ended up being like a +2.
Like a Goliath Gauntlet built in.
Yeah. A Goliath Gauntlet that let you see the top card of your deck, which again we stated was really strong in Azalea. But now that Bolt and Shot has become more and more popular, it fits really well, because oftentimes you want to threaten Bolt and Shot on hit, and then the reload lets you fire another arrow. If you don't have Bullseye Bracers, they can just block it and your turn ends. So Bullseye Bracers is kind of your safety net there, which is very important.
Right.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Last 2 pieces of equipment.
Yeah, done.
We got Snaps and Perch Grapplers. It used to be we just ran Perch Grapplers entirely. Because of Bolt and Shot again, because of Rain Razors, there's a stronger argument for Snapdragons, and I'm actually torn in a lot of matchups, which I like them. But my general rule of thumb is you play Snapdragons in matchups that aren't threatening big on hits, or threatening on hits, and then you play Perch Grapplers where you do need those breakpoints to block.
Right. Yeah, two block on a footwear is actually really good.
Yeah.
Not many do that.
The text on Perch Grapplers doesn't really matter.
Yeah, a little expensive.
I use it once in every 100 games or something like that. It's very, very rare. But it does come up once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That makes sense. I remember when I was playing a lot of Lexi into Prism, bringing in grapplers for erudition blocks and such.
Yeah.
Just really
Exactly.
major
Just that break
I
point.
mean, obviously now it's Prism's not as much of a big deal with that kind of must block.
You've got your old hymns, your bravos. This kind of hurt.
Yeah, but I think
or blocking on hits for Briar or something.
Yeah, because I didn't see Endless Arrow on this list. I don't believe. I think the level that you can use snaps for really big blowout turns is probably a little bit less, just because that's one of the major combos with
Rain Razor. Endless Arrow,
so you can
snaps.
So if you don't have Go again, you just snaps and then bullseye another Endless Arrow.
Yeah.
You keep going and getting reoccurrence, right? But that's the most obvious use case, right? So without that, I definitely agree that probably purchase just armor is just so nice, especially in a class that has very little of it built into your kit, and you have no actual way of getting around a lot of different things. Okay, that kind of makes sense. Is there any kind of other equipment that's possible to put in this list that maybe you cut last minute, or is this kind of
another one that's discussed is Nullrune Boots.
Okay.
Into Icelander.
Right.
I don't like it. We don't have enough pitch.
Right.
And just snaps oftentimes into Icelander just get used on like E-Strike draw card. So Snapdragon Scalers end up translating to an additional card, which
Quite good.
is just really good. So
Yeah. And I can see built-in Arcane Barrier too, I believe, with the headpiece and gloves.
Right.
So I assume that's probably enough.
yeah, the idea with Norrøn boots is being able to go up to 3 and
Right.
stop like
Like
the
a
blue
single
eight
blue.
price means.
Yeah,
I just don't have enough blues in the deck to do that.
Yep.
So
That makes sense.
yeah, that makes sense. It's a very aggro-leaning kind of mentality. It'd be like, why run more Null Rune when you're not going to have a lot of blues anyways, and your turn's
Right.
probably
Yeah.
gonna be that blue for other
Yeah.
things. That makes sense.
yeah, that
Okay.
blue is used to pay through the taxes more so than stop damage if I have it.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So core deck, or quote unquote core deck, and a lot
Right.
of players have variable kind of reasoning depending on what they put in their core and what they think about like a core versus side. Different deck building
Yeah.
philosophies, but we've labeled it as core just as like the cards that like fix up the core game plan
Yeah.
of the deck and like
Yeah.
the cards that you never want to not run in the deck. So I guess we'll go. Let's go with the non-arrows and then maybe go into the arrows. Would that be like a good separation here? Because I do see some non-arrows
Yeah,
in there that might have a specific purpose.
Yeah, they're a little scattered, but we'll try to organize it.
Yeah, so I guess if we'll go with the non-arrow attacks first. Enlightened Strike is just a very good flexible card. Like I was mentioning, Azalea is a deck that struggles to use 5-card hands. E-Strike can fix that.
Right.
Also has some very nice lines with drawing a card at the end of a turn, because unlike a lot of decks, I mean, I guess Oldham's probably the only other deck that can do this effectively. I don't really care what ends up in my arsenal due to cross-wrap and Azalea ability.
Yeah.
Right.
So blindly drawing a card and arsenaling it isn't like, oh, I drew a bad card, this is really bad now.
Yeah.
You obviously got better targets and worse targets, but none of them are just like, you lose the game if you draw it, or
Dead in the arsenal.
you have to just hold it in hand and not arsenal. So yeah, E-Strike, just the flexibility is really powerful. Also, just being a 3-block is never a bad thing.
Real good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And could also be pretty decent as like a 2-card hand too. Just come in, swing for 7, or draw a card and arsenal it. So
Yeah.
it fits that kind of play
I'd
style
draw a
of
card
blocking
off.
partially.
Yep. 5 draw a card off of a 2-card hand is very, very strong, because that ends up being 1 card for 7 or 1 card for 5.
Yeah.
Next attack is Ravenous Rebel. This card disappeared from the list for a little bit. I guess kind of backstory on talking about this. I've been playing Azalea on and off since the chain meta in Monarch, and that's where I kind of had my first like good result, which was a top 8 in RTN with Azalea. And so, the deck evolves over time as we get more cards and stuff. But at that point, I used to run 6 Rebels. Yellows were in the list. We had a much worse card pool at the time. And I've flexed back and forth, but it's come back into the list, and I love this card. How did the casters put it? Oh, they called it Opt Light, the margarine of Opt.
Oh,
Can't
yeah.
believe it's not Opt.
Margarine of Opt.
Can't believe it's not up. That's great.
Fair enough.
It's just such a valuable tool, especially when the deck is almost all, or it's very heavily red, and
Right.
also with cross wrap and our other Opt tools, we can usually just make sure it's going to be a red. So this is usually just a 0 for 4 kind of extender, and I mean 0 for 4 is just efficient. And one thing a lot of people struggle with when they pick up Azalea is they go, oh, I've got these on hits to stop my opponent, so I'm gonna dominate red in the ledger for 8 over and over. The problem is they block 3, and then they come back at you with a CNC for 6. So they took 5 and then hit you for 6, and then you just do the same thing, and you're not actually winning the game.
Right.
So stuff like Ravenous Rebel, just being very efficient as far as
Yeah.
damage.
It does
always
all you want it,
0
like
for
everything
4.
you want it to do. Also, look at the top.
Yeah.
Come in 0 for 4. Go again. Yeah.
Yeah.
It fits the deck really well.
Yeah, definitely like an all-star card in the deck. For non-attacks, I guess we've got Rain Razors is not actually, it's not an attack,
Right.
but
We'll take it. It's not an arrow.
yeah,
That's
so
right. Yeah.
it's another really big inclusion that we got from Everfest that on its surface, it's, oh, you're only firing 1 arrow, therefore it's a 1 card for 2, it's not great. Sometimes you get to fire more than 1 arrow, but it gets to be a reaction that your opponent has to play around
Yeah.
without actually being a reaction. lists used to run Razor Reflex. The problem was if you saw Razor Reflex on top of the deck and had or blindly Azalea'd into it, your turn was just kind of done because you can't play it. With being an instant, being able to be played early, so you can arsenal it if you need to lead the turn with it, or you can use it as a reaction. The flexibility is just really powerful. And then, like I mentioned, you spend 2 resources on most of your turns, so it's still just a yellow, which can pay for a turn. Comes down to the pitch, so when you get back to your second cycle, this is a trick that your opponent has to be worried about. So just overall, I play it in every matchup. Being a non-block is an issue at times, but overall it's just really, really important.
And it helps on those hands, I guess, where you do want to play out a 5-card hand or a 4-card hand. This is the card that can come out super easily, and then you can play 2 attacks on that turn.
Yeah. Knock the death whistle. I'd like to think most people know what this does. You know, you just get your... You set up... I actually don't like playing this card very much. If this card wasn't a blue, or it wasn't a 3-block, I could see it getting cut.
Cost 0, blue blocks 3, it does everything.
Yeah, but just having the option of tutoring an arrow is strong, but don't get overzealous playing the card, because at its core it is a -1. You are spending 1 resource to rearrange cards, or spending a card to rearrange cards without actually doing anything on its own.
Yep.
But it's good for late game closing and obviously blocking 3. And then we've got more of the buffs. Seek and Destroy is an incredible card, especially in this meta. Decks like Icelander and Oldham do not like Seek and Destroy, because they always want to have an arsenal at the end of their turn, and that says you can't. Take Aim's just a classic. Read the Glide Path is another really strong card from Everfest, which... funny thing, on Everfest, I think Azalea got probably one of the best set of new cards from Everfest of all the heroes. The problem was Starvo was printed, and
at the same time it eclipsed any power she got
at record power levels. So all of a sudden, Azalea's like, look at all these cool toys I got, and then just gets run over by all the other stuff. I don't even think she was that bad in that meta. It was just everything was so powerful.
One thing that happened too is everyone started siding into Starvo, and as a result they put in unmovables into almost every deck, and so Azalea's like, well, I have all these tall arrows now, and everyone has unmovable. So what am I gonna do?
Exactly. Yeah, after the first hit to Starvo, it wasn't quite as bad. I know there were quite a few Azaleas making top 8s in that second Starvo meta. ProQuest Season 2, I think it was. But yeah, the Read the Glide Path has just been a really strong tool, because again, knowing what's on top of your deck, kind of being able to extend your hand, gives you a lot of flexibility. And that's what Azalea thrives on, is flexibility on your game plan. Arrows, I mean, I don't think there's too much to say. I think Bolt and Shot actually is kind of a different inclusion. But it, up until a month ago, a lot of people didn't even play Bolt and Shot at all.
Really?
Up until a month ago, I only played red, and then I was like, wow, red's really good, I'll try the yellow. And I went, wow, the yellow's really good, I'll toss in the blue.
Now the blues, that's right.
Yeah. Just having flexibility for double arrow turns, or even just bluffing your opponent, going, this has 7 reload, and I have 1 floating and 1 in hand, so if you don't block this, you could get hit by another arrow.
Yeah. Great target for Brain Razors as well. You can play multiple Bolton shots, get more value there.
Yeah, you get to do kind of your best Lexi impersonation.
That's the thing. When Lexi came out, I think people understood why Bolton Shot was rare. In Limited, people were just kind of like, yeah, Bolton Shot. You don't see it as much.
It's meh.
You start actually... because it's not a common, so it's not going to be very draftable when everyone was drafting a bunch of tails. But then you go into Constructed, it's just you run 9 of these, because you can buff this thing 20 different ways, and the Rain Razor is also a really, really good one, right? So people just ignore the fact that the on hit is an actual on hit. It's something very reasonable to actually play to get around the fact that you can only reload so many times without the keyword reload on your stuff.
And especially in Azalea, where you only have the 1, I guess, right? As opposed to Lexi, who can do it twice with her Voltaire.
Right. But oftentimes, even just arsenaling a Bolt and Shot at the start of your turn and being able to lead it off with a buff, even a Rain Razor is ideal. Fire that, and then you get to go into the Death Dealer, fire a second arrow. Just leads to better usage of large hands.
Then we got the
Uh,
big boys.
Yeah,
The big
which
two, I guess.
Remorseless often gets grouped into that like big two, which really isn't. The card is very flexible and applicable in every matchup, but it isn't really a power card. But against defensive decks, you have the locking down D-Reacts at Arsenal text is relevant. Into aggressive decks, the life loss is relevant. So it fits into everything, but it isn't like an all-star in anything.
Right.
Outside of Fi, it's really good into Fi.
Yeah. That's fine.
Take 7.
I've had them take 5 or 6 extra damage on
Yeah.
it. It's like that's what that was almost better than a red in the ledger.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the core.
Awesome.
And then I guess that
Okay.
that transitions into the side deck and like what I'm looking for in the sideboard.
Yeah. So let's scroll down a bit to the side deck, and so
Yeah.
we'll kind of go into this in two different parts. Well, they're combined. You could talk about the side deck itself, and then specific to the matchup. You don't have to talk about every single matchup, obviously. The one
Maybe the more notable
most
ones that we see, like Old
Yeah,
Him,
the
Icelander,
ones
those guys. Yeah.
the ones that you particularly played, you can talk about, and then ones that maybe you planned for but maybe didn't see. I know, like the meta was diverse, but it was still 120, 130 people.
Yeah.
so
What's your Levia plan?
Yeah. Let's do Levy.
I don't know if I'll get into that one, but
But yeah, you could start wherever here. I don't think.
yeah. So kind of the basic tenet of, or one of the big like important parts when sideboarding is understanding your arrow ratio. Kind of traditionally, we had leaned a little more towards 21 of 60 as your arrows. I don't know what the number is on that.
Like
As far as
percentage-wise?
percentages. Yeah.
Like 35, roughly.
Yeah, something like that. And that felt a little bit low. One issue Azalea runs into is if you have too many arrows in your hand, you can't use them all.
Right.
So unless you get an opportunity to block with them, you kind of just have dead cards sometimes. But going into this event, I think like 2 weeks before, I switched up to 24. 40% is my goal. And the amount of no arrow hands obviously went down, and it felt a lot better.
Yeah.
It felt a lot better. It was like night and day on a lot of these games. Just the amount of games I just lost to not drawing an arrow went down drastically. So my kind of core is looking for 40% arrows.
And so in the main deck, maybe we can say how many we have here. So we can see, like, 6, we've got
Should be 12.
12 in the
Not
main
that
deck.
many,
Okay.
just 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you need another 12.
So another
essentially.
12 slots. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So for the most part, in matchups where I'm playing 60, which I guess for those of you who are paying attention, notice I said 40% and not 24 arrows. The matchups where I'm playing 60 are not. There's a lot of matchups where I don't. And again, that harkens back to what I was talking about, being able to be fatigued.
Right.
If you're not careful, you can sit down against a Reinar that has all 3 blocks, and he can fatigue you if you present 60 and aren't careful. So into those older decks that are just all 3 blocks, I typically am presenting more, somewhere in the 66 to 70 range. But for the aggro decks where I'm only presenting 60, it's 24 arrows, which is typically going to be adding in 3 additional blue arrows, which I'll get into the choicing on that, and then 9 of the red arrows, 9 of the 12 in the sideboard. So you kind of just pick which arrow does the least and take that out. So you sit down against like a Dromai. Fatigue shot doesn't do much because the vast majority of their attacks are dragons. So you might as well cut that.
Right.
Or you sit down against like a dash that you know is aggressive. You just cut the sleep darts because it doesn't do anything.
Right.
Or maybe all of your on hits do something, and you just toss in the headshots, or you take out the headshots rather. And then for the blue arrow choice, it kind of comes down to, or actually, we'll get back to that because that gets impacted by the remainder. You'll notice there's a bunch of D-reacts in here, and there's also a bunch of buffs in here. Depending on which way you're leaning, as far as do I need to be more aggressive or do I need to be more defensive, that kind of fills out a lot of the slots of D-reacts and buffs. So some matchups I'm bringing in 6 D-reacts and 6 buffs, or maybe I'm bringing in like 9 D-reacts and 3 buffs, or maybe I'm bringing in 9 D-reacts, 2 Memorial Grounds, and 1 buff. So it really just depends on how much I need to just race and how much I can actually sit back and defend. Like Fi, you can't really run too many D-reacts. because he comes in for 3, and if you're just blocking all the time,
Yeah.
nothing's really happening. So you end up tossing in a few of those buffs and a few of those Memorial Grounds to make sure that you can actually kill him.
Is Memorial Ground a staple in a lot of Azalea decks? 'Cause I have not seen this card played like ever.
Really? No, it is.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I'm not an Azalea like aficionado or anything, but it's just the card that
That's fair.
most people probably haven't seen in a very long time.
Yeah, Memorial Ground is a card that came out in Monarch that everyone was super excited about in the Azalea community because it gives you an opportunity to just set up a dominate. I've actually been kind of low on the card recently. I don't like it as much into aggro, but it's an important tool in aggro when it lines up, and it's also important into fatigue matchups.
Right.
So I cut it down to 1 at one point. It went back to 2. I know there's Azaleas who play 6, including the Reds. I'm not playing Reds.
So the Reds can fetch the 0 cost, I believe, right?
Reds can fetch the 2 cost.
Oh, I'm sorry, I went the other
2
way.
or low, yeah.
2 or low, that's right.
Yeah.
But
I mean, one captures most of them. So
yeah,
Right.
The biggest problem with Reds is it doesn't pitch efficiently. Like I mentioned, yellows are very good in Azalea. So yellow Memorial Ground is usually just pitched until you absolutely need it. Reds just have to get cast, and I'm not a fan.
Right. And what's cool is you can also pick the arrow that you want to use on that turn. So there could be an ability, right, that you really need for a certain matchup, and you can just get it, whenever you want. So it's pretty nice, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I cut it down to 2. At one point it was 1, but back to 2 for now. It might go to 3. We'll see. Where was I? Oh yeah, D-Reacts. The choice, it's kind of flexible. I think take cover is kind of next on the chopping block, as a lot of these matchups I'm not actually bringing in all of my D-Reacts. There's very few. Take cover, however, is pretty important into Oldham, because the Winter's Wail is a problem.
Right.
When you only have yellows and you need to spend 2 on your turn, you can't really afford for that frostbite
The frostbite,
to connect.
yeah, that makes sense.
So the 0 for 4s are important there, but overall, all-star card in the deck in the sideboard. That all you got?
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that
card
one.
is incredible.
Okay, yeah.
I know some decks aren't as big of a fan of it because they don't like yellows. I already love yellow 3 blocks. Like
Right.
That's already a good thing.
The card
That's
text was like gravy on the top at that
bonus,
point.
right? Yellow 3 block is already a great baseline, and the potential to stop a mask trigger and not actually use a card,
Right.
just incredible. Yeah, and card's very good. And then most of the time when I'm bringing a D-React, it's going to be Sink Below. I play Sink Below in almost everything.
Okay.
And then Fate's kind of the second choice, and then Take Cover is
And
the
then Take
third.
Cover.
And obviously, that all you got comes in the matchups where it comes in. So, yeah, into aggressive decks, it ends up being 60 cards, 24 being arrows, and then your choice of, and then the other core stuff in there, and then your choice of D-Reacts and buffs to kind of fill out that. So against like Briar, you actually want a few more D-Reacts, just because those embodiments become a problem. So being able to stop the 0 for 4s is important. Whereas something like Visceri, I don't like the D-Reacts as much because I can't block effectively against Visceri,
Right.
because of the lack of pitch. So you do kind of have to race a little bit more. So you put in more of those buffs and more of the aggressive tools. Let's see, what else is next on the list? We got Icelander. Icelander's an interesting matchup. Honestly, the Icelander matchup is a big portion of why I played the deck at the event. Going into it on paper, Icelander should be miserable. I was talking about I'm very tight on pitch. I pitch 2, and then that pays for my turn. 1 Frostbite ruins that. I'm a red heavy deck. I don't function under Channel Lake Frigid.
But they Shadow Lake from the arsenal.
Yeah.
You just kind of like,
Yeah,
all right.
it shouldn't be good. And I don't understand why, but the matchup feels very good. And kind of the first suspicion to this was when I was testing Icelander. For those of you who know me, know I played Icelander at the first Battle-Hardened Columbus, made top 4 there. I finished 9th at Charlotte Calling on Icelander. So that's kind of what I've been playing the past couple months. And every time I queued into Azalea on Talishar, the matchup was hard, and I was like, this shouldn't be hard. I think I ended up like 50% win rate into Azalea on Icelander.
And you knew the matchup really well because you mained Azalea for a long time.
I'm like the one person who should know exactly where to disrupt or where to disrupt Azalea, and it was still tough. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. So then when I picked up Azalea, I was running over Icelanders. It was like by far my best matchup as far as results. Obviously, you have skill gaps and stuff on Talishar where Icelander is a difficult deck to play. Maybe they don't know the matchup as well, but it felt really good, and I still can't pinpoint exactly why.
Yeah.
But regardless, that put me in this mindset of Icelander's good, Fi is good. Those I think are going to be two of the most represented decks. Might as well grab Azalea. But tying back to the sideboarding, sorry, I go on tangents a lot.
That's
I
fine.
apologize.
It makes sense.
That's why the extra blues are there. 9 being my high number of blues. I used to only run 6 in the list. We put in the extra 3 just for Icelander because as soon as you have a blue, that one Frostbite doesn't do anything.
Right.
So it lets me play my turn as normal through one Frostbite.
Okay. So you would play all the Bolton shots and all the headshots in this?
Yep. So my arrow count does actually go to 27 against Icelander, just because they're there as blues more so than arrows. And Icelander existing is also another reason why the red headshots made it into the list, because most of these on-hits don't actually do anything to Icelander.
Right.
Sleep Dart doesn't do anything. Hamstring Shot, I guess now starts to do something with people running more attack actions, but even then it's still not crazy.
Yeah.
Fatigue Shot isn't crazy. Red in the Ledger, like, none of them do a ton. The way you kill Icelanders with damage, so Headshot just is an effective arrow in the matchup.
Right.
Yeah, and obviously D-Reacts come out, and then you just hit them in the face, and they want to be able to block with cards. You stick Dominate on a card, and they get annoyed.
Buff it up, Nimblism, release, wide pass, take aims, all that kind of stuff.
Yep, you come in for like Headshot for 18 Dominate, and they have a bad time.
Half their health. There you go.
Yeah.
Did you have like a specific plan, Icelander, based on whether you're going to see like more battle mage style or more like traditional style with like spells and like 9-10 D-reacts kind of thing, or were you just
not really, because the biggest change there would be if I wanted to put in D-reacts, and in the Icelander matchup, just because of my lack of pitch, I never actually want to be defending. Like, I want to be able to play on the front foot, so if I draw a D-react and have to pitch that, it's hurting my damage output so much, as opposed to, hey, I could get one extra block, as opposed to blocking with an arrow when they attack with a physical attack.
Right.
So it kind of just comes down to a race most of the time. So I didn't care too much which they were on. Additionally, Sleep Dart, no matter what, does nothing into Icelander, outside of... I can't even think of a reason why they'd have to let me have the attack hit before they make the Frostbite.
Right.
But that's just the arrow that comes out. So the Hamstring Shot and Fatigue Shot were just kind of icing on the cake. If they had attack actions, great. If they didn't, great. It didn't really matter too much there.
Okay, that makes sense. So, well, I guess Fi was the next most represented deck that probably saw a lot of the Fis.
I was the most represented. And into Fi, I played a little more defensive, which I'm still unsure which is correct, but I guess specifically into Fi, I was cutting... It was a toss-up between Fatigue Shot and Headshot. Most of the time, Fatigue Shot is only getting 1 value off his first attack, because it's a 3 attack, loses 1 power.
Right.
Or Headshot gets 1 extra damage, and I think I'd rather race Fi. As far as if I have the opportunity for both of us to take 1 damage, or both of us to prevent 1 damage, I'd rather us both take 1 damage, because then once you get into that endgame state where they have to block and I have to block, I'm at the advantage. We kind of saw that for those of you who watched the top 8 game against Fi. Once we got into the health totals where both of us had to block, it's kind of just smooth sailing.
Okay.
When they have spare health, that's when it's a problem.
Okay. Is it because of the Dominate?
Come back.
Or it's because you get very efficient 2-card hands or 3 card hands?
I have efficient 2-card hands, and he can't just go, okay, I'll take your efficient damage and just attack you with a super wide hand. He wants to play 5-card hands.
That makes sense.
So yeah, I think for that reason, it's fatigue shot that comes out. That's what I have marked on my sideboard guide over here. I had mentioned the Bolton shot headshot for blues kind of was debatable depending on how aggressive I went. And in Defy, I was kind of like right in the middle. So it could go either way. I was actually boarding out the headshots in this matchup, but you could go either way. I was taking out 3 release the tensions, 1 nimblism, 3 take covers, and 1 fate for scene. So I was like exactly split on buffs and D-reacts coming out.
Right.
Which I think there's an argument both ways, whether you wanted to lean one way or the other, but I kind of found the middle ground to be the most effective. And obviously, that all you gots are in, Sink Belows are in, Memorial Ground's in. Yeah, sorry, I look at sideboarding as cards I take out.
Okay,
So,
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
I look at all 76 or all 74 in the stack, and then which 16 I would take out.
Which are mine.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's
Right.
fair.
So that's why it gets a little bit confusing there, explaining. But yeah, in Defy, that's basically what I was doing. That all you got was the MVP.
Yeah.
Very efficient blocking. That makes sense.
Oh,
So-
and boots. I played Perch Grapplers in Defy.
Oh, right. So you
because
want to get
oftentimes-
those.
Yeah.
The breakpoints.
The breakpoints,
It stops
yeah.
either the breakpoints or the mask trigger.
Right. Yeah. Block a Phoenix Flame mid combo, and then they can't
Right.
get mask. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
That's true. I guess maybe your own boogeyman, the Guardians, Oldhim. I don't know how
Yeah.
much Bravo there was, but I imagine Bravo is probably not that fun for this deck either.
It's not great. It's much more manageable than Oldhim, though.
Yeah, and not
Oh, yeah.
having ice is just like you don't have to worry about like Oldhim just slamming Channel Lake and
That
just
too.
like
Yeah.
pass.
I mean, it's more so the fact that Oldhim is able to prevent 4 additional damage on a Dominate that Bravo can't
yeah,
most of the
that's
time,
true.
in the
Crown of
form of
Seeds,
Earth
right.
React, Crown of Seeds, and Stalagma or Rampart.
Rampart. Yeah.
So it just makes it so the game plan of killing him before he runs you out of cards is a lot harder when normally it's anything over 3 goes through, and against Oldhim it's anything over 7 goes through.
Yeah. Oof.
It's rough. But yeah, so into Oldhim, I played everything except for the That All You Gots.
Okay.
So I played
Fair.
71.
The
Obviously, That All You
71.
Got,
Anti-fatigue.
it just doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
That All You Got doesn't do anything, but everything else kind of has its own role. Which is first cycle, the D-React stop the hammer, so you can play through it. Second cycle, you should have enough of those blues still in the deck, so you can play through the Frostbite on the hammer.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And is the game plan also kind of just block efficiently, come in with efficient 2-card hands, or do you see yourself sometimes keeping a full hand to do some like really aggressive damage?
Yeah, so that's a good point. It is very much so you need to be aggressive
Okay.
And take damage. Whenever possible, you want to trade damage with Oldhim, because the win condition for him, if he realizes the matchup, is you running out of cards. So anytime I'm blocking, those blocking cards aren't doing any damage.
Okay.
So blocking whenever you avoid blocking whenever possible,
Okay.
Right. No, that makes
Which-
sense.
which is not where you want to be as Azalea, but
That's right. Yeah.
and where you get forced to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you want to try and line up your buffs with Dominate whenever possible. The issue you run into is a lot of the ways you get Dominate are going to be off of like Read the Glide Path or Ravenous Rebel seeing a buff, or sorry, seeing an arrow.
Seeing an arrow.
Arrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The issue is with Ravenous Rebel, if you use Azalea afterwards, you're giving him an opportunity to use Rampart again.
Right.
So
okay. Yeah.
it's just not as efficient as you'd like. Or if you're using like Read the Glide Path, it's not a guarantee. So it's kind of the matchup often comes down to how often can you randomly stumble across a tall Dominate, which
Yeah.
or RNG, I guess, but
yeah,
that's what it is.
you play to it. You look for as many opportunities as you can where it's like, hey, this could be a 14 Dominate if I find it off the glide path. And
Yeah. Yeah.
then it's not, and he throws his hand, and you go, wow, I just used 3 buffs to do 2 damage.
Yes. Yeah.
Or maybe
But-
they don't know any better and then take all the damage and hit you with like I don't know, spinal or something like that.
Yep,
That's true.
That's the dream. That is the
true.
dream. I would love for them to take 8 damage. They can finally.
I don't.
Because you assume, because you know into
I don't-
Lexi, Spinal's an amazing card, but Maybe
Yeah.
not as good into Azalea, right?
Oh no, it's really really good into Azalea.
Okay.
But like if I have to take an off turn, but you took 8 damage to put me on an off turn, I
Right.
am okay with that.
At that point, you're
'Cause
just
normally-
trading damage, right?
Yeah, which is where I want to be.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah.
sense. Any changes for Bravo, or just kind of the same kind of idea?
Yeah, Bravo's basically the same, except Bravo actually plays Flesh and Blood against us, as opposed to what I say
Like to
Oldham
play
plays in
Flesh
Brick
and
Wall
Blood.
Simulator 2022.
You can get that
yeah.
on discount though. I'm sure.
What's that?
You can get that on discount there. I'm sure. But,
Yeah.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
that's
Outside of
reasonable.
Bravo having like a million D reacts, which some of them do.
Right.
Some of the control lists are definitely like running a lot more like health gain and D reacts and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So it makes it
but-
very grindy.
It's definitely a tough matchup, but it's still so much easier than an Oldham who decides to be a wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. The wall. Not just a
Mhm.
wall. Just
Yeah,
the wall.
the wall.
That's fair. Okay, so we've kind of talked a little bit about aggro, because I think you mentioned Briar and Viserai already,
Yep.
if I recall. Fi. Is there any other matchups that... Oh, I guess Dromai is the one that you probably have some thoughts on now.
Yeah.
I don't know if those thoughts have changed after your top 4, but maybe I don't know.
No.
maybe they haven't.
So my thoughts on Dromai haven't really changed. My thought on Dromai going into the matchup or into the day was there's going to be a ton of Fi here. So if I make it out of the first 3 rounds without doing too poorly, I won't hit Dromai for the rest of the day. Therefore, I'm taking up all of my Dromai tech from the deck to put it in for other matchups. And unfortunately, for those of you who followed the story, that didn't quite work out as planned. But you know,
Yeah.
it happens. I think it was a fair. I think it was a fair assumption. Obviously, taking a lower tier deck into an event, you can't be favored in every matchup.
Oh, yeah.
You sometimes have to go. There are matchups that I'm just going to have a hard time into, and I don't have space in my deck to do anything about it. So
Yeah.
I'm going to need a little bit of matchup roulette to get
Yeah.
through this.
A little bit of gem blessing to get through
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And that's yeah.
Did you have a specific game plan if you saw her, or just kind of just
Yes. So the
Yeah.
game plan into Dromai is take out all the D-reacts and hit her in the face and hope to line up tall dominates. And ideally, those dominates should be red in the ledger and sleep dart late. Sleep dart is more important early,
Right.
and it's kind of like early game stopping Ash, late game stopping Go again.
Right.
Red in the ledger, obviously late game stopping going wide. Sleep dart doing the same thing because that's the Go again. But you don't have a lot of agency in that matchup. It's kind of, do I draw really good hands? Because obviously killing the dragons is hard for me when most of the time I want to come in with 1 attack for 8.
Right.
So sending 8 at a Chromai feels really bad.
Or an Ashwing.
Yeah. So like the Ashwings I can't deal with.
Right.
It's just not an option. You can run poppers, you can run battering bolts.
Right. That's
they
the thing.
They're good into Dorinthia, and they're good into Dromai, and they're just a worse headshot into pretty much everything else.
Right. And if you run the red memorial ground, you can put it back on top of your deck.
This is true.
Combo.
So there are definitely ways to help with the Dromai matchup. The other one, I mentioned it early on in the conversation for another reason, the yellow Ravenous Rebel. That was on my radar as something to put in there. Just having that kind of pseudo-opt and being able to deal with things like Kyloria and Chromai effectively. But again, for the same reasons I mentioned with Oldham, Ravenous Rebel is a little bit of an underperformer in that matchup. So yellow Ravenous Rebel into Oldham just feels bad.
Yeah.
It's just not what you... It doesn't fit the game plan. It doesn't push damage.
Right.
So I had them kind of on my radar, and right before the event, I almost put in yellow Ravenous Rebel, and I was like, no, I don't think there's going to be Dromais. I think I'm going to see more Oldhams, and honestly, I might have done worse against the Oldhams had I put them in, so I can't complain too much.
Yeah, you don't want to sacrifice I guess some of the matchups where you're going to see more often. You're going to see more often, and the ones that you already struggle a bit against. So, just for a matchup that is less represented and that you don't really have a good matchup into anyway. So it's a little bit not really worthwhile. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you want to try this deck at like the Armory level, if you're expecting Dromais, Battering Bolt fitting in the list as well as Yellow Ravenous Rebel is definitely, or those are 2
Top
definite
contenders.
options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes
But
sense.
this list was designed with Dromai doesn't exist.
A lot of people did that with Kano back in the day before Icelander was a thing. Just, if you ran into a Kano, just pick up your deck and leave. But if not, you're good. Just don't run any
Early
AB.
launch. Early launch.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Was there any other matchups on the day that maybe you had a specific board for? I know you mentioned Dorinthia or maybe Lexi or.
So I do kind of have I do have a sideboard in mind for some of those more mid-range decks, like your Dorinthias, your Reinars, your
Reinar.
Bravos, even Dash. And those are
Yeah.
basically just board up to probably, what do I have down here? Between 67 or 66, 67, 70, somewhere in that range. And yeah, you just kind of play a mid-range game plan. I feel really strong into most of those matchups. At the very least 50-50, but I'm very comfortable into them because they're all decks that want to block and want to attack, and that's what I want to do. I just do it very efficiently.
It's all efficiency.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, efficient until I get back to my second and third cycle, which is why boarding up extra cards lets you kind of stay longer on your first cycle.
Yeah, so I guess it's just like how well do you do off like 2-card hands, right? So
right. I think Azalea is like the pinnacle of 2-card hands.
That's awesome. Yeah, I used to think that was Levia, but now she's like dead. So.
I mean, I guess Levia for 9 is probably like the best 2-card hand.
Right.
Like
you just might die from it later. That's the issue.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
It's a small issue.
Right.
You might encounter later in the game.
Yeah.
Minor detail.
Yeah. I mean, actually, there were some really crazy 2- and 3-card hands that I was able to pull off with Tunic and Bolt and Shot. If you guys saw my top 8 game against the Phi, I had the hand of Rabble, Red Bolt and Shot, and a Tunic resource. So I played double Rabble, Tunic load the Bolt and Shot, drew a buff, and then came in for 7. So 3 cards for 15.
4, 5, 7. 5. What was it? 4, 3, 7. Or did I count that right?
7.
4, 4, 4, 3.
Sorry. Okay. Yes. 4, 4, 7.
And the Tunic drew me a card. So yeah,
it's amazing.
15 off 3 just kind of turned the game. And there's a lot of lines with that, or along that line with Tunic and Bolt and Shot and E-Strike as well.
Yeah.
So even something like play a buff, Tunic, load Bolt and Shot, fire Bolt and Shot into E-Strike, draw a card is a net usage of 2 cards in Tunic for 12.
And you drew a card, right? So
well, I counted the drawing.
Oh, you already counted that into the 2 cards, right? That makes sense. Yeah.
So my net usage of cards is 2,
right?
And a Tunic resource, and I threatened 12, which is
that's amazing.
Really, really good. Yeah. So stuff like that kind of just flips games almost on the spot.
No, that makes sense. So thanks for going over your kind of sideboard and plans for all the different kind of matchups. Everyone can take notes and maybe adjust them if you see fit. With that, are there any like major changes or like considerations you kind of took from the event as far as your core or sideboard or anything like that you maybe would want to change going into like a big event or something like that?
Yeah, so the one change that I would put back that I used to play is I think I'm putting in at least 1 Remembrance for Oldhim. It gives you an opportunity to put back 3 buffs. And the reason I had cut it was Oldhims were leaning a lot more aggressive recently. And I was kind of banking on Oldhims not knowing how to play the matchup. So if they played more aggressively, the Remembrance becomes a hindrance instead of a tool. Kind of the thing that changed that was I played Fang in round 5. I ended up beating him, but we got deck checked.
Yeah.
So we were there an extra 12 minutes. So everyone else around got to watch.
Nice.
And figure out what was going on. So then the next 2 Oldhims I played knew to fatigue me.
Okay.
And,
yeah. Bit unfortunate.
Goddamn deck checks. It's always something. It's always
I was trying to hide my spice, and and the deck checks had everyone around watching when we finished. But yeah, I think 1 Remembrance goes back in.
Okay.
That's fair.
And possible Dromai tech if you wanted.
Right.
If you're
you
afraid
had mentioned
of
the Ravenous Rabble yellows, I think.
Yep. Battering bolts as a consideration.
As well. What about, so I mean, there are 2 cards in here that I think are very prevalent in Lexi that we don't see here. Art of War and 3 of a Kind. So any consideration for those cards at all, or are they just not part of the main strategy of the deck?
No. So Art of War would, 1, we're already tight on attack actions. Obviously, Lexi is typically in the 30 plus, maybe like 35.
Right.
They
Higher
might even be
density of
higher.
arrows, yeah.
Right. Well, arrows and other attacks to banish, whereas we are down to usually 30. So it gives us a little less flexibility. We also don't go as wide most turns, outside of Rabble and E-Strike.
Right.
Also, we're susceptible to fatigue, so I don't really want to be banishing my
Banishing a
attacks.
card to draw two. That's true. Yeah.
I also don't have many blues, so adding in one extra cost on a turn doesn't work with the pitch curve the same way.
Right.
So, and then 3 of a kind. The main reason that Lexi can get away with it is she can load 2 arrows with her
Right.
bow.
Yeah.
Yep.
Only being able to load 1 arrow means we have to front load buffs. So
Yes.
there are a handful of situations where 3 of a kind's good, like Tunic into 3 of a kind off an empty hand, lets you fire an arrow and still arsenal.
Right.
But outside of that, the cards drawn off 3 of a kind, you're only able to use 1 most of the time, maybe 2.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So it doesn't quite fit the game plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of
So
course, I guess
it's
New
not on my
Horizon
radar.
makes it a bit easier to play cards because you can arsenal 2 things that you can use with your 3 of a kind,
Two
right?
Arsenal better than 1 confirmed.
The math
was
checks
that?
out.
2 Arsenals better than 1 confirmed.
It not in Azalea.
Not an Azalea.
New Horizon is awful in Azalea.
Yeah.
I will stand by that one.
Yeah.
I mean,
You
you,
just
heard
need-
me singing my praises of cross wrap, so
You gotta find another way of getting a second Arsenal. I mean, there's got to be another way.
just
There you
just
go.
cheat. Use the second one.
That's right,
And
just
just don't tell your opponent.
get the-
They'll
get the
assume
play
it's just a
mat.
ranger thing.
That's right. Get the
Draw
playmat
another
anyway.
Square.
2
Draw another
squares there.
square on the map.
Yeah,
Just like
exactly.
on the red end of the ledger mat. Just put a felt pen.
It's like, what is this
Draw.
Azalea
Exactly.
here? I've never heard of her.
Yeah, but all the
The
other
new Azalea.
Lexi has 2 arsenal spots. Why wouldn't Azalea?
That's right. Yeah,
Literally
it's crazy how you see so much Lexi these days that you just take for granted that Rangers don't actually have 2 arsenals by default.
And back in the day,
Yeah, back in the day, the struggle.
we all had 1.
Also,
That makes
Death
sense.
Dealer doesn't work unless you have 0 cards in your arsenal.
That's true. So you can't really
So-
Death Dealer New Horizon.
Well, now you have
Nope.
to play Dreadbore, I guess, or something, or
No.
Dreadboard, that's a thing.
I got the name right. That's,
Yeah.
That's a
okay,
thing. Yeah,
Dreadbore.
yeah.
Sandscour
Redliner?
Great Bow is a lot more interesting. Redliner doesn't work with second arsenal slot.
Do you want
But
to give me
Sandscour
your very quick review of Sandscour, knowing literally nothing else about the new set?
Kind of. I want to know what aim counters do.
That's a good
But
point.
Yeah, nobody. I guess nobody
I think
knows
they
what
have to be
aim
really
counters do.
strong.
Right.
Right now, not having agency over what arrow you're loading, or not generating card value. Like you have the choice between
Yeah.
the two when using it is a very big disadvantage compared with Death Dealer.
Right.
So aim counters have to be very strong for me to consider it.
Yeah.
But
That's true.
that is a possibility. It's something I'll definitely mess with when it comes out. But
Oh yeah.
Have you-
right now, I'm not anticipating it just immediately replacing Death Dealer. I think
Because
Death Dealer
there is
again
a-
is incredibly strong, so like it takes a lot to replace it.
But there is a Marvel version. Have you considered
Just
instead
because it
using the
looks
Marvel
nice.
version? Look, hear me
Oh,
out,
that
hear
is
me
that is
out.
tempting.
It's a beautiful looking card.
I'm sitting here hoping. Well, I'm half hoping, half hoping not that they release a gold foil Death Dealer in ProQuest Season 3.
You know what? That's
Like,
not off the
have them.
table because there's a
Oh, it's
Nothos,
definitely
there's
possible.
Dawnblade.
Yeah,
I think there's only 2 so far, but
There's only
it's not
two.
off the
and
table.
Voltaire.
And Voltaire,
Voltaire,
right.
Well,
But from the
two
original, I guess,
Right,
8
right.
heroes, they've only released 2, so they must eventually release the other 6.
Right?
Yeah,
So I'm
they
like,
got it.
on one
Give
hand,
me-
I want it, so like, but then on the other hand, I can't really afford it. So
You gotta win and then trade with someone
I gotta
else who
win,
got
right?
it, right?
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
the play. Okay, well that's all we had. Appreciate your time, of
yeah,
course.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I know you must have had help. Maybe you didn't have any help, but this is a good time
Oh, no,
for any shout outs
Definitely.
you have for anyone who's helped you test, team, store, what have you.
Yeah, I mean, I got a decent list. We've got
Good.
first and foremost Min-Max Games. That's my LGS. That's where I get a lot of my games in.
Nice.
And they just have been a huge help across.
everywhere, huh?
Yeah,
I see
and
I
they-
see them
all
everywhere
the-
over Facebook. I
they're
saw
all
them
the
at New
events,
Jersey, I
those
believe.
Yep.
Yeah, they're in Jersey.
They've been vending a bunch of these events, but yeah, they've just been kind of helping me along the way this whole time. Sam Dando, he now works for Min-Max, but longtime friend. He's where I got a lot of my testing in. I know going into a lot of events in the past, I would be like, hey, I want to test Azalea. And he's like, I'm trying to test against meta. So all of our testing sessions, I got a ton out of them, and he didn't. And so it's really helpful. And I guess minor shout out to all the people on Talishar who don't dodge my games.
Because they see Azalea.
Does that happen a lot? Does that happen a lot? They see
yeah.
Azalea and they just dodge?
I mean, I'm queuing into competitive, and they sit down with their Fi, and they go, I'm testing for, like, Nats.
Yes, that's
and
a good
they see
point.
Azalea, and they're like, this isn't relevant, I'm leaving.
Ah.
So, all the people who stick around and let me get games in, appreciate it. Shout outs to Dan, who won the actual event. I feel like he's getting less attention than I am, even though he won.
As long as people see Azalea in top 8, it's like it's a lot more attractive. Right?
No, I mean, he's another min-max player who he's put in a ton of work going into it. He, definitely a well-deserved win, so it was really good to see him up there. I think that's the bulk of the shout-outs. But
yeah. Are you on the Azalea forums a lot, or the Discord groups there as well? Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, and shout out to all the people who were reaching out, like, with congrats and cheering me on. After they saw I made top 8, I was getting a ton of messages.
Yeah.
And it was just really cool.
Yeah.
100%. The Twitch chat, I got to go back and watch that. Twitch chat was awesome. They were great.
Oh man.
Yeah, no, it's just been a really exciting time for me. And just everyone's been super positive about it. So
fantastic.
You're gonna be at Worlds, I assume, in San Jose.
I am now. I was not going to originally.
Were you talked into it?
Well, top 8 prizing helped me pay for
that makes a lot of sense.
It was out of the budget originally, and now it's within the budget. So
it's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that. So
that makes sense. That's coming up soon. That's next week.
I know
That's true. I
was running around.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So.
No, that makes sense. Well, appreciate your time, and for all the viewers there, if you like this kind of content, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Go check out Roundtable of Rathe, whatever.
We'll have it in the description in case Eric's butchering it.
Roundtable of whatever.
Yeah, the roundtable of whatever. We'll have it in the description. And from wherever you're watching in the world, have a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Bye for now.